Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I walked out of his speech because I do not believe that this is a forum for people who use the kind of language that he used. We're talking about creating unity in a fractured world here, and his statements over the last month about Haiti, where I live and work, and many other countries in the world only deepened those fractures.
His speech was ho-hum, what we say, that it was neither here nor there. It was basically a speech of a salesman. It's not a speech of a leadership of a large country like America. And people expected him to take the global stage, and all he's doing was just tom-tomming his own achievements. So I think it was a missed opportunity for him.
Statistics are all wrong in his favor, of course. They are not accurate. As an African American myself living in America, I do know the impact of what his presidency has done to the African American community in terms of the division of the country. I know what it has done in terms of the division, and just to be at WEF where is a community, and WEF is so supportive of our work as social entrepreneurs. I think there was a huge disconnect with the information that the President of the United States of America delivered and the real experience that social entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs like ourselves doing work in America are indeed experiencing.
I mean, I came here with very low expectations, and I have to say he met them. It was a speech really about America first, and I think to understand these issues in the context of a global internationalist community, it just rung very odd. I think the audience sat there and listened. There were no claps. It fell flat. It was really selling a story of America.
I think it was a very clever speech, but it avoided all the difficult topics. And I think the major issue is that he was speaking as a national leader and not as a global leader. So when he was saying that we should not forget the people, he actually forgot the major part of the population of the world.
It is Monday, January 29th of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we're pretty much got the Bistro Cafe ready for your use, and thank you for joining us. A little bit of station news here. Got a message from the folks that handle our server and other things, and they're doing a industry-wide security fix, and it looks like our homepage is down where our player is at netrizradio.com. So if you're listening to us live, because you could also be listening to us on the podcast, but if you are listening to us live, well, it's obvious you're not listening to us on the homepage because the player doesn't work. And hopefully that'll be up soon. So they didn't give me any idea how long it would last. They didn't tell me if the whole station would be shut down or what. So, but we have some folks on that, and hopefully the homepage will be up right soon. Yes, indeed. Also, since you can't go to the homepage to click on the donation contribute buttons, when it comes back up, if you would do that, that's how we pay our bills, and your generosity certainly helps. And the bills are, there's quite a bit. We got to pay for podcasts, we got to pay for the server, just a multitude of things. And thank you so much, because truly we are unable to do it without you. Well, what a weekend, huh? What a weekend. Now, I would say that not all of the U.S. media gave Donald Trump glowing reviews at his appearance at Davos. But for the most part, he was sort of fawned over. Oh, yeah, he sat down and talked like a businessman, and all these other, wannabe oligarchs, they listened and they liked it. But not all of Davos was enamored with Donald Trump. The European media booed him roundly when he went off on fake news. And I'm just glad that Deutsche Welle interviewed some attendees to get their assessment of Donald Trump's appearance and what he means, what he says, and what the Europeans think, which I think is pretty damn important since, well, they are our allies. Yes. Grammys last night, and I have to confess I was a bit busy, so I really wasn't able to watch it, but I did follow what was going on social media, because you can catch up really quick. I mean, within moments. So apparently Nikki Haley, yes, UN ambassador, thought that for some reason she thinks that art and music is devoid of any politics, which is obviously she doesn't know anything about art or music. So I did give her a little YouTube link to one little song by Woody Guthrie, Old Man Trump. Yeah, music's not supposed to be political. Where do they find these people? Yeah, I know. From the Homeschool Network, apparently. What's on the menu today? Well, I better get into it, because there's always more news than we can attend to. But today, we will be speaking about House Intelligence Committee member Representative Eric Swalwell says Trump's delay on Russian sanctions shows he owes them something. Yeah, he's waiting till the last minute, like today. I wonder why. Chef José Andrés stands by his account that he was removed from the Cafe Milano at Ivanka Trump's insistence. His acceptance of Ivanka's and Lucchesi is the owner of Cafe Milano there in D.C., by the way, accepted their apologies just so that they could move on, not that the event didn't happen. Nice, huh? Yeah. And Angela Merkel warns that anti-Semitism is on the rise again in Germany. What a weird confluence, huh? In the world these days. Phew. After the break, we'll move to the chef's table to investigate how U.S. farmers could lose it all if Donald Trump's so-called NAFTA deal collapses. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Dansez maintenant sous l'été, les pieds nus dans le sable. Dansez maintenant et jetez vos ennuis dans les vagues qui dansent, balancent.
All right, starting off here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, is an article by Timothy Christopher out of Share Blue Media. Donald Trump has dragged his feet in implementing the latest round of sanctions against Russia, and with 1 day left Until the deadline, well, actually, since this was written late last night, it's today. A top Democrat is calling him out for it. Today. It was August of 2017 when Trump reluctantly signed a new sanctions package against Russia while issuing a bizarre signing statement complaining about the sanctions. That legislation set in October 1st of 2017. That legislation set an October 1st, 2017 deadline for implementation, which Trump missed by more than 3 weeks. He had some other things on his mind then, you know. Now there's a new deadline of today looming, and Trump has still not acted. And last I looked, he still hasn't. In an interview on Sunday's edition of CNN's Reliable Sources, House Intelligence Committee member Representative Eric Swalwell, Democrat of California, from the Bay Area, by the way, East Bay, he called Trump out for his repeated failure to implement sanctions and explained the rather obvious meaning of Trump's foot-dragging. When host Brian Stelter asked Swalwell about the sanctions, the congressman noted that, well, tomorrow is the deadline again, which is today, for the president to impose him.
There were sanctions, however, weren't there?
Yeah, that's right. And tomorrow is the deadline again for the president to impose them. So the Congress overwhelmingly voted to put sanctions in place against Russia and its military and intelligence officials. However, the president has delayed and delayed and delayed. The final deadline is tomorrow. But when people ask, what evidence is out there aside from, the indictments that we've seen and the contacts that they failed to disclose, I think the president's unwillingness to impose sanctions against Russia shows that he feels like he owes them something because they did something for him.
Indeed, even if Trump does end up honoring the deadline today, it will be the last minute and will be the continuation of a pattern in which he does the bare minimum he can get away with. Trump only signed the sanctions bill after it passed with veto-proof majorities and waited a full week to do so. But he also appeared to make what amounted to a legal argument against the sanctions bill, saying in his signing statement that the law encroaches on the executive branch's authority to launder money. To negotiate. Well, we know it's to launder money and pay back Putin for all the work that he did for the Trump campaign and Trump over all these many years. Whatever the result, Trump's delays are not fooling anyone, but if Swalwell is correct, they are designed to send the clear message to the Russians that Trump is doing his best to do nothing about their attack on our democracy.
Dansez maintenant et jetez vos ennuis dans les vagues qui dansent, balancent au gré du vent salé. Dansez maintenant tout l'été, aimez-vous.
All right, next item here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is by Addie Baird from Think Progress. Now, there's been quite a few countering accounts of what happened at Cafe Milano in D.C. with Chef José Andrés. And the latest is that José Andrés stands by his account. So it's odd that is not prominent right now. I've checked, and it seems that when he had accepted Ivanka and Lucchesi's apologies, that he was admitting it didn't happen. But there's something else going on here. Let's look into this. Okay, so celebrity chef, activist, and Trump agitator. Well, we'll see about that. Trump agitator. He got sued by Trump because he was pulling out from the old post office there in D.C. because of many things. The travel ban, his Trump's policies against Mexican Americans, etc. Let's also remember José Andrés fed more hot meals to Puerto Ricans and continues than FEMA, the Red Cross, our military, all of them combined. Millions. José Andrés, he's the hero of Puerto Rico. But because he's the hero of Puerto Rico and Trump, doesn't like that, and also the judgment was adjudicated in José's favor, and also Zacharian. I believe that's the other chef that was involved backing out of moving into the D.C. hotel. Okay, so Trump agitator. All right. José Andrés was reportedly asked to leave a party Saturday night because his president was making for his daughter, Ivanka Trump, uncomfortable. Yeah. Andrés tweeted about the incident Saturday night, saying, "I'm the only individual not allowed in? Is it because Ivanka Trump told you so? You should be ashamed of yourself." Former Mexican ambassador to China, Jorge Guardo, said on Twitter Sunday morning that Andrés was in fact asked to leave because his presence made Ivanka Trump uncomfortable. In a new low for Washington yesterday, Chef José Andrés was asked to leave the alfalfa dinner after party at Cafe Milano, D.C. by its owner, Franco Nucesi, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to malign the Lucchesi crime family, all right? Apparently because his presence made Ivanka Trump uncomfortable. Cafe Milano is the watering hole of the Trump administration. Well, of course it is. According to Guardo, when Ivanka arrived at the party, Cafe Milano owner Franco Nucesi asked to speak with Andrés outside, and then Andrés was not allowed back in. So, let's see. Jose Guardo then tweeted, at the alfalfa dinner, Franco came up to José Andrés and gave him a friendly kiss. What? A little later, he would be asked to do the Trump's dirty work and, like Judas, betray an old friend. Now, we all know that Ivanka currently works in the White House. I don't know what her title is. She doesn't have a security clearance, but, serving her father as an advisor, and Andrés has a testy history with the family. In 2015, after Trump announced his candidacy and made racist comments about Mexicans, Andrés pulled out of a restaurant deal. He had planned to open a new Spanish-Japanese joint in D.C.'s Trump Hotel, and he had reportedly worked on the restaurant design with Ivanka Trump herself, but it fell apart after Trump's racist remarks, and the Trump Organization sued. And the parties reached a settlement last spring. In the months since, Andrés is spending much of his time feeding people in need in Puerto Rico, where the island is still feeling the effects of a devastating hurricane season. The chef developed a network of kitchens, supply chains, and delivery services, serving up more than 2.2 million warm meals to people in Puerto Rico. Now, as the New York Times put it, no other single agency, not the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, not FEMA, not the military, nor any government entity has fed more people freshly cooked food since the hurricane, or done it in such a nurturing way. Because all those others want you to feel bad that you're the victim of a hurricane, especially if you're brown. Andrés has also been vocal about immigrant issues, closing all but one of his D.C. restaurants on a day without immigrants, and offered a free drink to staffers of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in the midst of a chaotic fight about who the agency's director was. Now, most recently, the chef offered to buy lunch for the winners of Trump's fake news awards, which I didn't win. I wanted a dinner. The White House declined to comment on the record about Saturday night's party incident, but an unnamed official told Political that the story was absolutely not true. Well, 2:30 yesterday, I believe this was East Coast time, Cafe Milano owner Franco Nucesi tweeted, in response to claims that Andres was removed from a party at the restaurant, saying that Andres is always welcome and that Ivanka Trump played no role in the misunderstanding that resulted in Andres being removed. He said, Chef José Andrés, you are always welcome at Cafe Milano when we are open, and in fact, I will host you and toast to all your successes. I am sorry for the misunderstanding. Last night, the restaurant was closed for a private alfalfa dinner after party. Of note, the dinner and after party are different guest lists. Also, Ivanka Trump had no role in determining event attendees. I have owned my restaurants, and I would hate to be put in this position. Unbelievable. Well, Andres then tweeted back and updated at 7 p.m. last night. Despite the response from the restaurant, José Andrés said Sunday evening that he stands by his account of that evening that Ivanka Trump asked for Andres to be removed from the party because his presence made her uncomfortable. He tweeted, "Let's not confuse my trying to be generous and move on with anything else. What happened, happened, and I stand by my account. I'm ready to move on."
Dansez maintenant, tout l'été, vous serez des cigales qui dansent, balancent, au gré du vent léger. Quand l'hiver sera venu, vous prend au dépourvu. Vous danserez main dans la main et attendons l'été prochain. Dansez maintenant, tout l'été, aimez-vous sur le sable. Dansez.
All right, last dish here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays, is out of Newsweek by Damien Sharkoff. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has issued a warning about what she called a shameful and rising level of anti-Semitic intolerance, German public broadcaster Deutsche Welle reported. Speaking on the official government podcast, Merkel stressed the prescience of highlighting intolerance because of a recent rise in anti-Jewish and other hate crimes, and Merkel's remark came on the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Anti-Semitism, racism, and the hatred of others are rising, Merkel said, adding that she plans to introduce a government commissioner role to deal specifically with anti-Semitic issues. It is inconceivable and shameful that no Jewish institution can exist without police protection, whether it is a school, a kindergarten, or a synagogue, Merkel said. The Memorial Day marks the 73rd anniversary of the liberation of the most infamous Nazi concentration camps at Auschwitz. Several recent statistics about anti-Semitic crimes have prompted fresh concern about attitudes toward Jews in Germany, as some 470 anti-Semitic incidents were reported in Berlin in 2016. Berlin alone, up by 16% since the year prior. I wonder what happened in the world that would have prompted that or inflamed it even further. What could that be? German lawmakers approved the creation of a senior post for presiding over policy against anti-Semitic discrimination and crime. Though Merkel has not been able to appoint anyone to it as she continues to negotiate forming a government in the aftermath of September's inconclusive election. New measures of tackling anti-Jewish sentiments have been prompted by fears that groups in the German public are shifting away from the mainstream stance on Berlin's World War II history, as evidenced by the rise of the far-right AfD party following the arrival of almost 1 million refugees, predominantly from Muslim countries. We just got used to the Jews, and now they're ramming Muslims down our throats. When is it ever going to stop? Oh, yeah. Sounds like America. Merkel's counterpart in Austria, Sebastian Kurz, echoed her words and bluntly acknowledged his own country was one of the perpetrators of and took part in the worst crimes of the Shoah, using the Hebrew word for the Holocaust. Today, we commemorate the over 6 million victims of the Holocaust, Kurz wrote on Twitter. It is our responsibility to continue the fight against all forms of anti-Semitism with all determination. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a leader of our country that would stand so staunchly against anti-Semitism? Or any sort of hate crime perpetrated against anyone? And I'm not talking about the good people who are Nazis, who are being maligned, apparently, unduly. I'm not talking about them. We know who we're talking about, Donnie. 2 Scoops. When are you going to step up to the plate? Well, maybe he'll just have to be interviewed by Mueller. There's a lot more in that Flynn document, apparently, huh? A lot more. And I think it's gonna, Ben Wittes would say. Boom. All right, let's get to our break. We'll come back and give you some weather and finish up for the rest of the offerings at the chef's table. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Rough Ice. Those of us of a certain age might remember the first reality show. Way before Survivor or the Kardashians, there was the story of Nancy and Tanya. Set against the unlikely backdrop of the 1994 Winter Olympics, these two rival figure skaters weren't so much battling for the gold as against each other, especially after a bizarre attack on Nancy Kerrigan. The film chronicles the incident, as it's called, which was planned by Harding's ex-husband with the possible involvement of Tanya herself at some level, and was supposed to keep Kerrigan out of the games, thus making it easier for Tanya. Only it didn't work out that way. Kerrigan went on to win the silver, and Harding, who because of her role in the mess was banned from the sport for life, became the butt of jokes. The film tells Harding's story through dramatized and often contradictory interviews with Harding, her ex-husband, and her chain-smoking mother, played by a scene-stealing Allison Janney. Early on, Harding learns she is a skating prodigy and realizes it's her ticket to a better life. That is, one away from her abusive mother and non-present father. All of this is designed to cast Harding in a sympathetic light. And it works, also providing a fascinating look at class through the lens of sports. It also emphasizes that ultimately Tanya's worst enemy was Tanya, as she refused to play the game of what was expected of her and her increasingly visible role. Tanya felt that talent alone should be enough to win over the judges, but ultimately she fought the law, so to speak, and the law won. How much or how little Harding knew about the attack in advance isn't the focus of I, Tanya, and that's probably a good thing. What you get here is a well-told, tragicomic story of talent squandered. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Get a flu shot. It's already standard advice from your doctor, but it may be even more important for senior citizens at risk of heart attack, because a new analysis in the New England Journal of Medicine found that a flu infection raises the risk of a heart attack by 6 times, and other viral infections can also up the risk to a lesser degree.
These viruses cause stress on the system overall, and so increases the metabolism, and so people who are at risk for having a heart attack, that can tip them over.
Jeff Kwong is an epidemiologist at Public Health Ontario and the Institute for Clinical Evaluative Sciences. Kwong and his team evaluated that risk by studying the histories of 20,000 older adults with confirmed cases of influenza. And they found that within 1 week of a flu diagnosis, the group suffered 6 times as many heart attacks on average than they did during control periods when they weren't sick, which Kwong says is another good reason to get a flu shot.
If you're high risk for heart disease, then it's probably a good idea to get one to reduce the chance of heart attacks.
And since they also found a link between heart attack risk and infection with other viruses, like respiratory syncytial virus, Kwong has one more oft-repeated piece of advice to keep you healthy during the cold and flu season.
Washing your hands frequently to prevent all sorts of respiratory infections.
That practice will guarantee some heart-healthy exercise, too, because to wash your hands properly, you gotta get off the couch. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. One method of constitutional interpretation is to examine the intention the framers of the Constitution had when writing the document. This method is often called original intent or original history. It is based on the idea that the Constitution by itself does not always have an obvious meaning. Therefore, we should look at the intentions of the people who wrote it. Those who believe in this method say that the justices should base their decisions on how the framers would have decided. They claim that it is the approach most faithful to the ideas in the Constitution. The problem is that it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to figure out what the framers intended on some issues. There were differences of opinion among the 39 framers. How can you determine who had the correct view? This method of interpretation also gives no guidelines about types of situations that did not exist when the Constitution was written. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
There's a robot in your future, but not one of those cute little labor-saving automatons like a Roomba vacuum cleaner. Far from saving you from doing extra labor, this new wave of robots is being brought into your workplace to rescue corporate bosses from paying you to work for them. Oh, you might think, not my workplace, for I'm not a factory worker. I've got a college degree and I work with my brain, so no contraption doing rote mechanical tasks can take my job. But wait, these are thinking machines, implanted with complex neural networks and super-fast algorithmic computers that operate in sync, functioning much like the cluster of specialized cells in the human brain. These brainy bots have a fast-evolving ability to watch, listen, and learn on their own, even able to produce and teach other robots. Not only are they displacing flesh and blood workers on factory assembly lines, but millions of them are now being moved into professional, managerial, creative, and other occupations previously assumed to be the secure domains of higher-educated, higher-paid people, maybe even you. To be clear, it's not robots that are taking our jobs, but corporate profiteers. They're creating a robot economy in order to displace you and me with inexpensive machines that don't demand higher wages or health care, don't take sick days or vacations, and don't organize unions, file lawsuits, or vote for pro-worker politicians. It's to be a plutocratic utopia designed by and for the corporate elite, and they're pushing it hard and fast, hoping we the people don't wake up until it's too late. This is Jim Hightower saying, robots are not our enemy. The corporate bosses, bankers, and BSers who own robots are the ones doing this to us, and now is the time for all of us whom they're about to discard to rebel against their socially destructive greed.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour World Report recorded on Friday, January 26, 2018. I'm Mark Boulanger. In Brazil, former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is fighting false corruption charges as the nation heads towards national elections. C. Marie Ainsborough reports.
The international labor movement is supporting efforts by former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva to clear his name of false corruption charges. This week, an appeal court upheld a lower court ruling which convicted Mr. Lula and increased his sentence to more than 12 years. The ruling in both courts was given despite no evidence to support the charges of corruption levied against the former president. Mr. Lula is a former trade unionist who led the country from 2003 to 2011. When increasing Mr. Lula's sentence, the appeal court judge acknowledged there was no evidence of corruption, saying he had a personal conviction that Mr. Lula was guilty. Mr. Lula's popularity in the country has been rising lately. This has angered the country's oligarchy, which, in a 2016 coup, stole power from Dilma Rousseff, who had succeeded Mr. Lula as president. Sharon Burrow, the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation, condemned the sentencing of Mr. Lula. The ITUC is the global body which represents national labor centers such as the AFL-CIO in the United States and the Ghana Trades Union Congress. Ms. Burrow told the media that Mr. Lula's conviction was politically motivated. Democracy in Brazil, said Ms. Burrow, must be restored, and the only way to do that is through fair and democratic elections in which Lula has the right to be a candidate. General elections in Brazil are scheduled for October 2018. This is C. Marie Ainsborough reporting for Radio Labor.
The world's largest global union is celebrating its 25th anniversary. Created in January 1993, Education International, EI, is the organization which represents teachers and other education workers at the world level. It represents some 30 million workers who are members of 400 unions in 172 countries. It works to improve the wages and working conditions of education workers. It has a particular focus on improving teaching as a profession. Fred Van Leeuwen is the founding General Secretary of Education International. I asked him about EI's 25 years and what it has done for education workers in that time.
When we created Education International in 1993, the Berlin Wall had fallen 4 years earlier, and Fukuyama had just published The End of History. We all thought that we were moving into the right direction, that freedom, human rights, democracy, that it was just a matter of time. Although I don't want to say that this optimism has disappeared, it has turned into a sense of realism. Now, when you're asking me what has been achieved in the past 25 years, I think first of all I should say that we have been able to help education unions around the world to take a leadership role in promoting democratic change in their countries, from Tunisia, Algeria, Egypt to Djibouti, Lebanon, Iraq, Bahrain during the Arab Spring, also in the Asia-Pacific region, the Stun countries, Turkey. It's a very long list of countries and places where I think we have made, or at least tried to make, a difference. Now, in terms of the profession, teaching profession, it is quite clear that today nobody with some sense, except perhaps the World Bank, would dare advocate that teaching is not a profession, that teachers do not need to be highly educated, or that they are not crucial to the delivery of quality education. Now, 25 years ago, this was being whispered in some international circles, and that's no longer the case. So I think we've changed the narrative. We brought teachers back to the center of the education debate. We've undertaken valuable research to substantiate our claims. We were able to get UNESCO to develop and adopt a recommendation on the status of higher education teachers. We got an ILO instrument to protect the rights of early childhood education. We manufactured new international consultation mechanism for union leaders and education ministers in in the OECD countries. And frankly, I think that organizations like UNESCO and OECD have moved to our side of the aisle, which, of course, doesn't mean that governments moved as well. Many are unfortunately still stuck in the belief that our school system, first of all, is to improve a country's economic performance, serve the needs of the market, neglecting the need of for equal access, for a broad curriculum, and for more space and time for teaching professionals is exactly one of the main challenges that we are still confronting. I've always believed that education and the union movement are very important forces to help democratic development and promote human rights.
Mr. Van Leeuwen is the founding General Secretary of Education International. He is stepping down after 25 years of guiding EI and 37 years as a leader of the teaching profession's international activities. He will be replaced March 1st by David Edwards, a Deputy General Secretary of EI. Mr. Edwards is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the United States. Now here with his report about union events around the world is Labour Start correspondent Derek Blackadder.
Here's a small sample of the average of 240 news stories added to our site each day last week. Our top stories section included links to coverage of the airport lockout in Fiji, where a win in the courts for the union has produced more repression by the government, an analysis of the effects on American workers of the first year of the Trump presidency, and the return to prison of a seriously ill Iranian union leader. We had news of strikes and lockouts in dozens of countries. Here are just a few highlights. Public sector workers across Nigeria were refusing to work until the wages owed to them were paid. A strike by Brazilian public transport workers ended the planned privatization of the Sao Paulo metro system. Golf club workers in Taiwan walked off the job when 15 workers were fired for insisting on being paid according to their collective agreement. Across South Africa, university workers escalated their wage dispute by downing tools for a day. Public sector workers were off work to demand higher wages across Slovenia. And in Pakistan, public health employees were striking to prevent the privatization of their service. Our top working women's stories included coverage of a survey of British hospitality workers that reveals widespread sexual harassment at work, an apology for, quote, sexy outfits, end quote, comments from the Malaysian Journalists Union, and a spontaneous wildcat strike by women workers at a Kenyan hospital after a male member of staff was accused of sexual assault. The Health and Safety Newswire, we run in cooperation with Hazards magazine, carried stories to hundreds of union websites around the world about the deaths of 17 workers in a warehouse fire in India, a blockade of French prisons by staff concerned about the increasing level of violence in their workplace, publication of a report on the changing patterns of workplace dangers in China over the past decade, and a limited warning strike over safety concerns by Israeli public transport workers that was cancelled by a court order. Currently, Labour Start is running 6 online actions. Take just a few seconds out of your day and join thousands of trade unionists around the world in helping workers make their lives better, or even help save those lives. This is Derek Blackadder from Labour Start, reporting for Radio Labour.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Radio Labor's newscasts are available on its website, iTunes, mobile phones, union websites, and community radio stations. Follow us on Twitter @Radio Labor. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. President Trump delivered remarks to the World Economic Forum meetings in Davos, Switzerland on Friday, saying that between recent tax cuts and the elimination of regulations, it was the perfect time to bring foreign businesses to the United States. On trade, Trump condemned unfair economic practices and subsidies, but just days after America's former trade partners in the TPP deal finalized their new agreement, he seemed to express some free trade envy.
The United States is prepared to negotiate mutually beneficial bilateral trade agreements with all countries. This will include the countries in TPP, which are very important. We have agreements with several of them already. We would consider negotiating with the rest, either individually or perhaps as a group, if it is in the interests of all.
Trump is due back in Washington on Friday evening. Turkey will expand anti-Kurdish military operations in Syria to include the entire border zone east to Iraq. That statement Friday from Turkish President Recep Erdogan means the Turkish military could soon run into American troops holding down territory liberated from the Islamic State. Turkey contends America's Kurdish allies are terrorists. And WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange had his day in court on Friday, or at least his lawyer did. Assange remains in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he's sought shelter since 2012. His lawyers contend that since criminal charges against Assange from Sweden were dropped, he should be free to leave without fearing arrest. But the British government contends Assange must still surrender to authorities for violating the terms of a previous parole, and that he shouldn't be awarded with immunity for successfully evading the law. A judge will rule on Assange's case on February 6th. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Well, thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. And, now that we are comfortably ensconced here at the Chef's Table, let's open up with a palate cleanser, which is always weather from around the world. And we'll start off at the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, which is where the mothership of Networks Radio is located. Okay, well, currently it's 42 degrees. We are expecting showers today and a lot more showers tonight. And then we're going to have a drying out spell. We're going to be considerably warmer than what we have been during the day. We're going to go up to, says 62 today, a low of 43 tonight. Tomorrow we'll be in the low 50s, and then we'll slowly slide up into the mid upper 60s for the next week or so. And but everything is subject to change, obviously. Air quality is only moderate at 57 parts per million. If you have breathing problems, you might want to stay in if you're in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon. Pressure is holding at 30.27 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles. Humidity is 74%. Okay, so now weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and these people live around the world. London is 52 with rain. Paris is 52 and cloudy. Rome is 57 and sunny. Kiev is 38 and fair. Kabul is 33 with light snow. Hong Kong is 45 and cloudy. Tokyo is 37 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia, in the dead of summer in the southern hemisphere, is 73 degrees and fair. San Francisco, California, is 52 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York, is 42 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And let's see, they did have a weather advisory, and it looks like it has been lifted. Well, that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and these people live around the world.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour, pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Let's dive into this offering out of Reuters by P.J. Hufstetter in Chicago, David Lundgren in Montreal. Additional reporting by Rob Nickel in Winnipeg, and also additional reporting by Lucas Jackson in Dixon, Nebraska. A collapse of the North American Free Trade Agreement, which U.S. President Donald Trump, assumed President Donald Trump, has threatened to scrap, could create the most profound disruption for U.S. farmers who produce grains, meats, and dairy products sold to Mexico and Canada. Yes. Blake Irwin, a third-generation American who raises cattle, corn, and soybeans in Dixon, Nebraska, said on Saturday that he is not closely monitoring the negotiations, but that he hopes the outcome will support U.S. farmers who are struggling to make a living due to low commodities prices, rising healthcare costs, and high property taxes. A trade agreement has to be fair for the U.S., but we also want to keep those exports going for the farmer, said Irwin, age 34. We do not want to mess up any good things we got going. Well, there are other people that don't like the fact that you get to sell your stuff overseas. Oh, well, but they don't know much about the way the world works. Irwin spoke to Reuters over the weekend as U.S., Canadian, and Mexican negotiators met in Montreal for the 6th of 7 planned rounds of talks to revamp the 1994 pact. U.S. farmers and exporters are fighting to preserve their exports at a time when Canada is finding customers in new markets. They also face strained relations between the U.S. and Mexico, a major buyer of U.S. corn, wheat, beef, pork, and dairy products. Well, the U.S. is behaving so badly it is going to create opportunities for Canadian agriculture, Iowa State University economist Dermot Hayes said last week during a visit to Winnipeg. But the trade flows have already begun to shift. The U.S. remains the dominant grain supplier to Mexico, yet Mexico imported 583,000 metric tons of corn from Brazil in 2017, a 980% jump from the previous year. Well, they just cut down all that rainforest and grow corn, soybeans, and other monocultures and see what happens then. Yeah, I'm not talking about economics, but we are. But the weather will collapse, and then we'll have a climate problem, won't we? Let's see. Mexican imports of U.S. soybean meal used to feed chickens and livestock fell 29% in the first 11 months of 2017 compared with the same period the previous year, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Trump's animosity toward Mexico and complaints over trade imbalances have pushed longtime buyers to work with new suppliers and expand existing relationships in South America, the European Union, and other regions, trade experts said. You get partners who build a bond and get real comfortable working together. We're starting to see that bond become more important than price for where countries are buying grains, said Carl Setzer, risk management team leader for Max Yield Cooperative. Case in point, a rare 30,000-ton shipment of Brazilian corn steamed its way in November to grain terminals in the state of Veracruz, Mexico, operated by agribusiness heavyweights Cargill Inc. and Archer Daniels Midland Company. Those guys, the ones who got caught in price fixing all those many years ago. Despite a steep decline in U.S. corn prices, with stocks sitting at a historic high, the buyer paid a premium for the Brazilian grain, as much as $2 more per ton, according to trade sources. A Cargill spokesman said the company had no immediate comment, and ADM did not respond to requests for comment. Canada last week agreed to join the new version of the TPP, part of a broad effort to court new trade partners. You know, the one where the U.S. just wasn't part of the negotiations because they can do it without us now. Yep, the tough NAFTA negotiations have convinced Canada that we have to have a number of trading partners, not just one, said Ron Bonnet, a beef farmer and president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. The revised TPP, known as the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, will reduce tariffs on Canadian pork, beef, and wheat to Japan and other markets, and in some cases eliminating duties altogether. Darcy Vetter, former U.S. Chief Agriculture Negotiator, said if the talks dragged on past March, they might not end until next year, making it even more challenging to sell American farm products. This almost sounds like a Russian plot to bring down our way of living. Maybe. Other trade agreements will be implemented. Buyers of U.S. products in Mexico and Canada won't be sure that we are a good long-term bet, and so we're likely to see our clients react accordingly, she told the panel on NAFTA in Montreal. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for today, and we certainly want you to continue listening to Netroots Radio throughout the day. Hopefully DigitalOcean has gotten that security fix that is actually an industry-wide fix, and our homepage will be back up accordingly. Stay tuned for podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on Spreaker. I'll have that posted, in an hour or two, maybe more, maybe less, and look for announcements on social media for that. You can also find show notes and links at the diary I post on Daily Co's for each show, and please do that, and we will visit with you tomorrow on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.